Quick comment before we get into the topic at hand. Shout out to all the Shakur Stevenson simps posting emojis, crying emojis all over my video, telling me I'm crying, even though I'm laughing my ass off at both guys and the clown shit that they were doing in that fight. So let me get this straight. Studying film, looking at all the evidence, and discussing it for damn near every single round of the fight. That's crying, and posting crying emojis is what? High-level boxing knowledge? What's interesting is that not one of these crying simps ever posted a single scorecard. Didn't even tell me which string of rounds, if any, Shakur won or lost. None of it, right? Because they don't have a scorecard. They didn't score the fight. They just remembered the last 3 rounds of the fight and Chris Mannix's scorecard, and, they know boxing. You don't. Anyway, a fight is 12 rounds, dummies. 12 rounds. Usyk versus Dubois. There's this narrative that Dubois is a changed man. He's not a boy anymore, right? Yeah, he's roided. Or a lot more than before. Obviously. Duh. But, this time is different. And hey, maybe it will be. But we're supposed to believe, most importantly, that Daniel Dubois has improved. Has he? Usyk's team is not buying it. They're saying it's the same guy. It's the same dude they fought. It's just an illusion. And frankly, it is. At least to a large degree. So, on this comeback trail from the Usyk, after the Usyk fight, he fought Jarrell Miller, who was, a victim of weaponized drug testing program in boxing, right? This is no longer just a theory. We know this shit exists. Now, whether or not it happened to Jarrell Miller, what do you think? So, this wasn't Jarrell who was, a walking pharmacy throwing over 1,000 punches per fight, which is incredible for a heavyweight, just barging in through the front door and like a bowling ball knocking people over like pins, right? It wasn't that same guy anymore. And by that time, he knew his place. That if he stepped out of line in any way, shape, or form, he was going to get punished, right? He got punished for bad-mouthing AJ by bringing up the fact that AJ was a walking pharmacy too. So he was a jobber, in my opinion. And, if Daniel Dubois is to bring chaos to Usyk, he is not to fight on his back foot, retreating all night like he did against Jarrell Miller. So we're not going to read much into that fight other than to say it was a confidence builder for Daniel Dubois, who had just upped his prescription and was trying things out, right? Seeing how things went. And, he did a good job, all things considering. So kudos, I guess. He didn't quit. But I'm not reading much into that fight because that wasn't the same Jarrell Miller anymore. And I think he wasn't there for a paycheck. I think that was his first significant fight after having been, after almost having his career ruined. They took away millions of dollars from him, and then they dangled that check in front of him. And so he just played ball. It is what it is. Then we had the Philip Hrgovic fight, right? What improvements did we see in Daniel Dubois? What improvements? We actually saw a regression. I think probably because of roid rage and this idea that he has to be a man now. He has to fake it until he makes it. He has to be a tough guy in the ring. He just came forward and Philip was landing like 50 right hands per round. And it was amazing that Daniel Dubois stood up to it. But having seen him as, somewhat chinny in the past, I was surprised. But then again, pharmacology. Let me take another sip of my coffee. And Philip looked out of shape. And we know he has quit in him too. But even considering all those things, Philip was beating Daniel Dubois up. And you started seeing Daniel Dubois breaking in that fight. Getting backed up, getting hurt. And you could just tell he was breaking mentally also. But then he started using his head viciously, right? And once he cut Philip, it took a while, but once he cut Philip and he saw that blood, he smelled blood, that just reinvigorated him, right? The Roid rage came back and overcame his mental weakness. Because he got a foothold in the fight and he was able to have some success. But it was still ebbs and flows, and I think the first 5 rounds, Daniel won the last round of that fight, or the penultimate round, and that obviously that partial round was all his. But yeah, I think the first 5 rounds or whatever it was, Philip just dominated, right? But Dubois was getting into the fight a little bit because he was starting to land a little bit more. And especially these vicious headbutts. And I thought it was interesting, side note, how the referee was warning Philip for holding and rabbit punching, even though, well, if the guy's running in on you with his head and you're throwing a punch, or if he's viciously headbutting you, then and the referee's allowing him to, then it's all fair game. If there's no rules, there's no rules. No. There were rules for Philip, but not Daniel. I mean, this dude was just... He probably landed 20 vicious headbutts. And he was swinging his fucking head. It wasn't just like he was walking in with his head and swinging it. It was incredible. It was a wrecking ball. Like a wrecking ball. Another sip of my coffee. But anytime Philip felt himself a little bit and threw some punches, Daniel was wilting mentally. But then he just kept coming and kept headbutting him. And Philip was slowing down. He couldn't keep the pace and he couldn't see anything. So that gave Daniel Dubois the courage, I guess you would say, the balls to stay in the fight. Because he was melting and wilting. There were like 3 instances in that fight where his knees were going, like he was looking to take a knee. He picked himself up, told himself no, and was able to beat with his head mostly. A guy who has shown that he has quit in him, wasn't probably taking boxing very seriously anymore, if ever, and, was a little flabby around the midsection and just gassed really, really quickly and became dejected and quit. Basically just quit. Quit fighting. So, I mean, what improvements did we see in that fight? The use of the head? Better juice? More juice? Because when it comes to the way in which he was fighting, that wasn't even Daniel Dubois, because Daniel Dubois is a standoff and or come forward boxer puncher. He does come forward very, very slowly in his boxing stance, and he throws a jab and a straight right hand. And if he's close enough, a hook. That's who he is. In that fight, he was told to be a wrecking ball. And he was falling off balance, falling all over himself, smothering his punches, right? Because it wasn't about the punches, but he was just falling in, off balance. His footwork was atrocious. His punches were very inaccurate. He was sloppy. He was swinging wildly. It was just he looked like a drunk having a fight in the back alley or some shit like that. You know the analogies. Looked horrible. There was no technical improvements. There was no better box. There was none of that. It was just a guy on the juice coming in with his head and just chaos, right? Chaos. That's how he's going to beat Usyk. Chaos. So then there was the Anthony Joshua fight. And at that point, I mean, Joshua has had, mental problems since Ruiz won. He's just been fragile. That's why when he was told, for example, to step on the gas against Usyk, he couldn't really do it. It was easy for Usyk to put him in his place. He's just been fighting scared ever since Ruiz. Just scared. It is what it is. He'd freeze up, and he's like Shakur Stevenson, right? Fear clogs up his boxing brain, and he just can't execute. He can't pull the trigger. In many instances, when he's scared, which is a lot. Shout out to all the Stevenson simps. And even in that fight where he got off to a good start, he was low blowing, he was using his head, and the referee nipped that in the butt right away. He's like, no, you can't do that to AJ. Yeah, some Croatian guy, who gives a shit, right? We don't respect those people, but AJ, he brings in the money. You can't do that to him. But Daniel got off to a fast start because Anthony Joshua just, soiled himself again. He shit at the bed. And he was just kind of standing there, pity-pattering, afraid to commit, scared. Instead of doing what Philip did, except if that's Joshua doing it, Daniel Dubois sleeping, right? Landing all them right hands. And I thought he was going to find his balls for that fight and do that. But he was just too scared. So Daniel Dubois pushed him back and was able to hit him with some good punches. But again, Daniel Dubois was squaring up on the way in, falling forward, looking horrible from a technical standpoint. He was just barging in through the front door, no defense, he was standing off a little bit, looking like the old Daniel Dubois, but then he would just jump in and commit all these grave errors. His face was in front of his knee, things of that nature, front knee. His feet he was crossing his feet. It was bad. We'll get to that in just a second. And then when the referee prevented him from cheating and he wasn't able to execute that, by all means necessary game plan, AJ started getting into the fight. AJ's balls started growing a little bit. And he was starting to hit Daniel Dubois with his jab and the right hand. And Daniel started wilting mentally. The knees looked weak for a second there. But he got himself together. And I don't remember exactly the last sequence. And you have to imagine that all those knockdowns, all that success that he had, putting Anthony Joshua down and hurting him, kept him in the fight mentally because he was having real success. But then AJ started having success, and there was this one little moment there where Daniel was just, starting to wilt. Another sip of my coffee. But then AJ got overconfident because of the little success that he had, and just started going in, straight in, not using his jab, just looking to detonate, I think the right hand it was, dropping his hands. So Dubois hit him with one punch that wasn't all that clean, and Anthony just made the same mistake. Dropped his hands, throwing the right, I think, and Daniel just countered him and knocked him out. And it's fucking AJ. An absolute pussy who, even though he was coming forward, taking advantage of the little bit of success that he had, it seemed to me like he was frozen with fear. Also, like, because he just threw technique out the window and just walked straight in with his hands down and chin up in the air. Is Usyk any of those things? Is he going to do any of those things? You know what I mean? No. And the types of chaos that we've seen give Usyk problems in the ring was Derek Chisora. And Daniel Dubois can't fight like that. He can't put one foot in front of the other, stay there while throwing punches, and then crosswalk forward again. Just walk forward. He trips. He falls once he crosses his feet, squares up. He falls off balance. He goes back into his standard orthodox stance. For example, he doesn't have the type of lateral movement. He doesn't have the kind of ring craft or savvy that the grizzled veteran Derek Chisora had. Doesn't have the types of swooping cut-off punches. He's got the dirt, though. He's got the dirt that Chisora had. More vicious. But Chisora is shorter than Usyk, and he would get low. And that facilitated Chisora's head being... He wasn't very good at being able to hit Usyk with his head, because it's not that easy. The guy's very good defensively. But because the angle from which the head was coming, that gave Usyk... He really had to look out for that punch, and it fucked him up a little bit, especially early. And the low blows and all that other stuff, right? Grabbing, holding, and hitting. And the fact that he would just walk toward him and cut the ring off on Usyk. That was problematic. Daniel Dubois can't do any of that. If he does, he's going to be square with his chin up in the air and his hands down in many instances and his chin forward. Off balance, I mean... And Usyk, from what I've seen, the little bit that I saw is training for that. To walk up into a big counterpunch. And if he's not able to knock him out, to definitely hurt him. So Daniel Dubois is going to come forward. Expose himself. Which will give Usyk the ability, at some point, right, after he warms into the fight, is going to give Usyk the ability, I think, the opportunities. Usyk's not great at fighting going backwards, but he could stop and drop and walk you into counter punches. He can do that. It's not his forte. His forte is coming forward and or boxing. He's an aggressive fighter. He's a fighter. But I mean, Daniel Dubois is so bad on the front foot if he wants to bring chaos that if he tries some shit like that, like he did against AJ or Philip, he's going to get walked into a hard counter. Usyk's going to plant his feet and put him in his place. And what's his place? Standoff, jousting, jabbing, straight up boxer, right? And we're going to find ourselves in fight one. Except Daniel Dubois, maybe a little buzzed, a little hurt, maybe even less confident. But I think it's going to be ebbs and flows. I think Daniel, if he fights like that, will try again. And Usyk's just going to find the counter punch, or he'll follow him out and hit him with something where Daniel's going to have to reassess, and he's going to put him back in his place. Maybe he'll try it again and get put back in his place. If not, get knocked down, get stunned, hurt. But it's not going to take one big punch from Usyk, but probably a few. So I imagine it's going to be a little tough. Usyk's going to have to move a lot. But again, this isn't Chisora. And another thing, Usyk is a southpaw. He's going to take the angle on Daniel Dubois, who's not that good on his feet, especially coming forward. And he'll line him up and walk him into something. So then Daniel's going to, be his old self. And after that, it's just fight one, because he didn't improve. He just added reckless abandon, aggression, roids, and a lot more vicious cheating into his game. That's all. So, okay, Usyk is older now. Daniel is getting his, man strength, let's call it that. And you got to give him credit. I do think he has more confidence going into this fight. I think he's for the most part faking it, but you could fake it until you make it. And I think he's at that point of faking it where maybe he's also starting to make it. I'm not going to discount this newfound higher testosterone levels, right? You can't just discount that. That's a real thing, a real tangible fucking thing. Clearly, the dude, he talks different. He's just different now, right? He's juiced as fuck now. Obviously, roid rage. He was mostly quiet and shy and all those things, and they just upped his testosterone levels artificially, and it shows. You can't discount that. I'm not discounting it, right? And he's put on like something like 10 pounds, maybe 15 pounds of muscle. He's much heavier than in that Usyk fight. We'll see what he is on the scales, but maybe with the same muscle definition, he might even be 15 pounds bigger, right? No, all natural. Anyway, so yeah, Daniel is a little bit more experienced. He's been through the fire a little bit, so that's important, right? And he's more aggro now. I'm gonna give him that. He's a little bit tougher mentally. He'd have to be, right? Maybe just more aggressive. Yeah, okay. We'll put it down to that. He's just more of a physical specimen now, okay? He's more dangerous from a physical standpoint, no doubt about it. And Usyk is a little bit older, and he did slow down. He is slower now. It shows. So there's that advantage for Daniel Dubois. However, Usyk had already seen this dude. He had already solved him. So even though there might be a little wrinkle that he has to still deal with, once Daniel is the Daniel that he knows, and no matter what Daniel does, he's always gonna be Daniel. He's gonna, whether he's standing off or he's barging in through the front door or backing away, a lot of the same mistakes are still openings, habits. It's also gonna be there. And Usyk being a cerebral fighter, he's got that experience. So even though from a physical standpoint, the scales shifted a little bit more in favor of Daniel Dubois, because Usyk has slowed down a little bit, Usyk has experience, even more experience, but more importantly, he experienced Daniel Dubois. He knows him now. So insofar as the gap between them, it's the same as going into the first fight. It's just going to be a little bit different. And the only thing that Daniel Dubois really improved in, is better at, and added to his game that works, I guess you would say, is all the dirt. He's just more vicious with all the fouling. So the only way Daniel Dubois wins this fight is if he's just allowed to foul Usyk. Basically. Because that's really the only improvement he's made. They made him angrier, more aggressive, and dirtier. And he's still Mr. By all means necessary. And Don Charles is putting it out there, right? We're in London now, right? We're going to be allowed to get away with the dirt. Usyk is getting paid tens of millions, $100 million, right? The establishment, they're going to feel like we're providing him with this opportunity. He's beaten all of our boys. K2 is no longer with Usyk protecting him. There's a high chance they're going to be allowed to just fuck him like they did Sugar Ray Robinson versus Turpin many, many years ago, right? And they still brag about that victory when that was just... that was bullshit. It was total bullshit. So Daniel Dubois is going to try to grab a hold of Usyk, and as he's grabbing a hold of him, he's going to try to use his head, right? And that's going to be very difficult for him because he's too upright, and Usyk is very good defensively, and he knows that he studied this guy. He knows that that's what it is. But if the referee stops that, as he should, yeah, that he takes away Daniel Dubois' best weapon, Daniel's going to shed a tear inside. He's going to get a little bit dejected. Those knees are going to go a little weak just for a little bit there. So then he'll come in looking the low blow. And if the referee takes that away from him, those knees are going to get a little bit spongier, a little bit weaker. And a lot of that bravado, a lot of that, toughness, aggressiveness, roid rage is going to go away. And he's going to be left to boxing. And if he still wants to be aggressive like that, he's going to get walked into some big punches, and those knees are just going to get weaker and weaker. And you know the rest. You saw the first fight. So if the referee acts like he did in that AJ fight and does his job as he should, like he did in the AJ fight, and notice they're not telling us who the referees or the judges are. And you'll have a good idea of how the fight goes once they announce the judges and the referee, right? If it's British judges, British referee, I'm not going to tell you where to put your money, but Daniel probably wins the fight by crook. But if the referee imposes the rules of boxing on both men and it's a fairly officiated contest, Usyk stops Daniel. We see the old knee taking Daniel come back. Usyk stops him in 8 rounds.